Everybody, we are live with another edition of the State of Bitcoin podcast. I am here with special guest at BTC Gandalf or Bitcoin Gandalf. If you've been following me for a little bit, you know he joins our Twitter Spaces every Friday at 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time. He's a great guest. So Gandalf, how you doing?
What's up, Brandon? I'm good. Thank you. Thank you very much for having me on the show.
Of course, of course. It's a pleasure to have you, my friend. All right. Well, for those that don't know you in the audience, let's see. Let's introduce yourself. Who are you? And I guess you've been doing this thing for quite a long time as Gandalf, huh?
Well, the Gandalf thing's just a year old, I guess. In Bitcoin terms, that's 10% of the lifetime of Bitcoin, or just under that. But yeah, I sort of took the orange pill back in around February last year. So I went in, I've held some Bitcoin since 2019, but I kind of went all in November, December 2020. And in that process, I also sort of began to understand the difference between Bitcoin and and crypto. I wouldn't say the rest of crypto because I don't even consider Bitcoin as crypto. So I'll just say the difference between Bitcoin and crypto. And yeah, ever since then, I've just pretty much spent my entire waking and sleeping hours thinking about Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's
But
awesome.
yeah, but other than tweeting, or I guess because of my tweeting, I've ended up also in the very lucky position that I work at two Bitcoin companies. So I help run BTC Times, which is a Bitcoin only news publication, online news publication, and I'm also a social media marketer, copywriter, general brand ambassador, wizard at Brains and Slushpool as well. And then I
Yeah,
do my own podcast occasionally. I tweet. I've got a newsletter that is rolling out very slowly. All the usual stuff.
yeah, you got a lot of stuff going on, that's for sure. A lot of
Yeah.
content too, and yeah, I mean, you were kind enough to bring me on to write for BTC Times too. So there's a lot of other great writers on there, and the contents keep churning out. So if you haven't checked it out, check out BTC Times. It's just at btctimes.com, isn't it?
BTCtimes.com. And then we have the at BTC handle on Twitter, which is
Yeah,
amazing
follow.
because I don't think you can even get handles that are 3 characters long anymore. I think the minimum is 4. So, uh, yeah, you can't get 3 character handles anymore. So it's a pretty special handle.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right. Well, let's get into it. So you actually sent me a newsletter earlier today by Crypto Haze, titled "Energy Canceled." Why don't you go over a little bit about, I guess, give me the 50,000 feet view of it, and yeah, we'll get into it. It's a little bit about the petrodollar and kind of like the overall macro environment, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
Yeah, correct. I mean, so I took my daughter on a walk this morning with my wife, and it was probably about just over an hour walk, and I said to my wife, "Do you want me to explain to you?" I had just read this blog this morning, and so I said to her, "Do you want me to explain to you what is going on, macroeconomically right now, and with Russia and Ukraine and she's like, okay. So I spent an hour and 10 minutes just like basically nonstop talking to her, explaining this blog post. If people haven't checked it out, it's called Energy Cancelled. It's by Arthur Hayes. He's one of the co-founders of BitMEX, which is one of the earliest Bitcoin and crypto derivative trading exchanges. Um, and I think the guys so Arthur Hayes is sort of not in hiding, but he's been indicted on, like, I think, breaking the Bank Secrecy Act. I think all the co-founders of BitMEX have been. So I think Arthur Hayes he negotiated some deal and turned himself in. I think he was like hiding out in Singapore. And he like negotiated to fly to Hawaii recently, or in the last like 6 months or a year, fly to Hawaii, turn himself in. I don't know exactly where they all sit now, but I think one of the guys is in jail, and the rest of them are like working on plea deals and turning themselves in, and then like paying fines and whatever else. So yeah, for people that don't know, but and I think they started the company in Hong Kong. So there's stories floating about of like their early days when they're making boatloads of money trading and running BitMEX and just having a lot of fun in Hong Kong. So, but yeah, it's Arthur Hayes, Crypto Hayes on Twitter. And all his blog posts are amazing. I don't know if he has like a set schedule of publishing, but they come out every so often, maybe like once a month, and he covers sort of what's going, like the biggest thing that's going on. And he's just a very good writer. Like, not only like is he a clear thinker and writer, but he's a very good storyteller. So you get like his blogs are very long, but you get engrossed in them. This latest blog, he's basically covering what's happening with Russia and Ukraine and the implications, the macroeconomic implications, um, to the commodities markets and also to currency and fiat and world reserve currency markets and gold and Bitcoin. So um, the general sort of gist of it is that the US has basically began to destroy trust in the US dollar as the world reserve currency. Um, the way most economies function now is uh, everyone has a sort of safe haven asset that they save all their, especially sovereign nations, that where they save their reserves. So countries that have trade surpluses, which means basically they export more goods than they import, so they have positive trade balances. Those countries store their excess wealth in U.S. treasuries. That's been traditionally the sort of safe haven asset. And so that's meant that the U.S. can issue pretty much like unlimited amounts of debt because there's always been this demand for dollars from countries that have trade surpluses who buy treasuries to store their wealth, right? But of course, that the country that's buying the T bills, uh, requires that they be able to trust the US that, they're not going to devalue the dollar, that the dollar is still going to be like a safe haven reserve asset, that the US isn't going to default, that they can sell those T bills whenever they need money. Um, so what people are starting to realize with what's happened in Russia is that if you piss off the US or you do something that the US does not like, they essentially control you via control of the currency and control of the T bills. And they've essentially canceled, like, I think Russia had something like $630 billion in foreign reserves in euros and US dollar denominated assets, and all those are now essentially canceled or blacklisted. They don't have access to those reserves anymore. Um, and it's made countries realize, like, if we're saving in US dollars, we're at the mercy of whatever the US wants us to do. Uh, the sort of the next domino in this set is China. I think China has like something like $3 to $4 trillion of US treasuries, which they will now be thinking about, like, before I go and do something to piss off the US, I want to take Taiwan back, but I don't want to lose $4 trillion. I don't want that to cost me $4 trillion. So what are all these countries going to do now? They're all going to dump US assets, but they're basically all going to dump fiat assets that are controlled by external sources, and they're going to move to holding wealth in commodities. So uh, Hayes thinks the case that Hayes makes is that countries that have lots of natural resources, they're going to make sure that their countries are taken care of first. So they're going to be holding commodities for themselves to make sure they're populated. They have enough coal for their population, gas for the population, oil for the population, wheat, nickel, copper, whatever. All these commodities, like any country that produces them, they're going to make sure that they can hold on to a certain amount of them, and then maybe sell the rest off to the rest of the world. And they're going to be picking very carefully who they sell to. And then Hayes makes the case that sovereigns are going to move to holding gold again as like their sovereign wealth reserves, and that the individual, because gold is so cumbersome to physically take custody of, the individual's version of using non-state money is Bitcoin. So he thinks that over the next decade we might see he's saying we don't know, this has never happened before, where we cancel a country, basically take their foreign reserves that are denominated in US dollars or euros, and then also stop trade with them when they're the 12th largest economy in the world and one of the biggest producers of natural resources. So we have no idea what the second, third, fourth order effects of this are going to be. But he seems to think that there's going to be a massive shock. So all assets, there'll be like basically just a massive market crash in all assets. And then there will be a sort of reorganizing of what assets are important and which aren't. And he thinks like gold, Bitcoin come out on top here. And he made price predictions for gold to go above 10,000 an ounce, and I think it's about 1,900 or 2,000 an ounce now. And then his case for Bitcoin is a million. I don't know if he said a million or more than $1 million, but obviously, like that's a 5x move in gold, and how much 20x move in Bitcoin price from here, more than 20x. So pretty crazy times.
Yeah, for sure. So, Dan from the audience has asked, he makes a good case for gold, also for Bitcoin. Did you ever think about getting into gold after reading this article?
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely considered it, and I think his case for countries moving to gold first because it's just established, that's what they're used to. It makes complete sense. And his price. I mean, if we go by his price prediction, right? He's betting 10,000 an ounce gold, a million Bitcoin. So obviously the upside on Bitcoin is way higher. Now I know there's a case to be made for diversification in case one doesn't play out, um, versus the other. I could say I'm going to just hold Bitcoin because it's going to go to a million. Why would I have gold? Why would I hold gold if it's only going to 5x? But of course, like you could be wrong on gold that it like goes to 50,000 and Bitcoin doesn't really move, or he could be, so you kind of have to make a bet. I'm not going to hold gold because I just think it's too cumbersome to. I want to take. I would want to like take physical possession, and I don't want to buy a gold bar and then have to sell an entire gold bar if I need the money for anything. I don't want to hold gold in my house. Like, I already don't hold my Bitcoin keys like in one physical location, so that I can't, there's no way to $5 wrench attack me. So with gold, I would be $5 rent attackable if I had gold in my house. And I just don't trust paper gold. I think when shit goes down, if you have a piece of paper that says you own some gold, good luck to you. But if you have access to your own Bitcoin keys, then you're good.
Yeah, $5 wrench attack. Yeah, I haven't heard that one before. That's a good one.
It's
But
a
yeah,
it's a popular it's a popular phrase in the Bitcoin security world.
I gotcha.
It's a
Well, I
physical.
mean,
It's taking your key by physical force or taking.
yeah, I mean, it makes sense too. But yeah, I mean, I think that's why a lot of people are kind of flocking to Bitcoin over gold is just the ease of use of it. Just like you were saying, you can take your own keys and everything like that and store them in multiple locations. And storing your own gold is a little bit more difficult. We have the Canadian Bitcoiners in here that said, the confiscation of Venezuelan and Russian gold makes Bitcoin more attractive for governments around the world. And I also think the same way with, an individual holding gold as well. It just makes it holding Bitcoin's a little bit easier than holding gold and ensuring that that gold is legitimate and everything like that. And to sell it if you're in a bind or anything like that, it's just the use case for Bitcoin obviously is a lot better than the use case for gold, and that's why a lot of people are flocking to it, to say the least.
Yeah,
Um,
Arthur makes the case that if the case for gold becomes blatantly obvious, because I still think most people don't understand gold and hard money versus fiat currency. Like the general public has no fucking idea, right? And but he's making the case that um, if the whole fiat currency thing has become like a bit of a meme. It has entered the sort of like the general or more of the mainstream attention, right? Now people, I would say like 5 years ago, no one would have been able to know what a fiat currency was. They don't understand, but I think the term fiat and like inflation, it's very much in the mainstream now. And if gold, I just read that Canadian Bitcoiners comment. Yes, it is a $12 wrench attack now. Correct. Inflation. If it was a one Bitcoin wrench attack, because one Bitcoin is one Bitcoin. But Arthur makes the case that if the case for gold can be widely understood by just the average person, then the jump to understanding Bitcoin via the analogy that Bitcoin is digital gold is a relatively straightforward one. Um, because again, I think people just like, if you ask someone like why is real estate a popular investment for like, the mainstream, they'll just say, oh, because it always goes up. They don't actually know why or whatever, right? They're just like, they've been told, they understand real estate goes up. They've heard some investment expert say you should buy real estate and it goes up 20% every year and put your money on real estate. And so everyone just does that. And then real estate goes up and everyone thinks they're smart, but they don't actually understand it. And I think it's the same thing with like, if gold becomes the narrative, and there's like countries moving towards holding their reserves in gold, then I think the average person will, and gold price goes up, the average person will be like, oh, now the thing is to hold gold, buy gold. And I think we move very easily to Bitcoin from there. But we're still the Bitcoin has Bitcoin is better in most ways than gold, but it still has the challenge that people, just all the normal FUD that makes people not understand it properly. They think it's used by criminals. They think it doesn't have any intrinsic value. They a lot of people don't think that it has that the cap is real. They think, oh, somebody could just change the code. Like, yeah, so they don't understand it. They don't understand it.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, I agreed with your point though that I think inflation and everything like that is kind of becoming more mainstream. People criticizing the Fed for every move they make, or at least trying to understand it, is definitely becoming more mainstream. I mean, I think the other day I saw, like a maybe it was like a tweet or something like that, or somebody was posting on Instagram. It was kind of going viral that it's like, well, all these people are complaining about inflation and they want you to believe it's about Russia when they printed trillions of dollars and gave you $1,400 of it. And, now gas is doubled and all these other things. And they want you to believe that, hey, it's all because of, the conflict going over in Russia and Ukraine when, you know, people aren't that stupid. Like, they're going to go back and like look at it eventually. And I think more and more people are waking up to the fact that, the current system that we're in is messed up. Like before, it was just like, okay, it's the status quo, and now, people are like, all right, the status quo is like negatively affecting like millions of people. So, I think more people are going to kind of slowly get into Bitcoin. As unfortunately as farther along as we go in this like inflationary time, and at first they told us inflation was transitory, and now they're saying like there's going to be at least another year of high inflation. Now by all accounts, it just seems like there's really not an end in sight. One of the guys I see on Twitter is handles at Wayfaring Bitcoiner, I believe, or BTCer. He posted a headline from CNN today that said that they're looking into giving inflation stimulus checks to
I've been
kind of
calling this. I've been joking about it, like saying that they're going to print more. The solution is going to be, hey, gas prices are up, so we're going to give everyone $1,000 so that it helps you cover your increased gas prices or increased energy bills or increased food bills. Uh, it's it's a meme, but it's going to come true.
Yeah, and Joey and I were talking about this last week when I had him on as well, and it's like eh, I don't understand like how people don't put two and two together. I know like some of the inflationary times are some of the other, there's some external factors that also are affecting inflation, whether it's supply chain issues or, I mean, the geopolitical issue in Ukraine and Russia right now does play a part in it. But I mean, how can you say that printing trillions of dollars doesn't play any role in it at all? I mean, it's insane to me.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I don't think, well, actually, they are kind of saying, I was going to say they don't claim it doesn't. They just kind of don't acknowledge it and they just blame it on something else. Not exclusively blaming it on something else, but they are blaming it on that other thing. Um, but I just realized like Biden does come out and he says like, government spending doesn't cause inflation. That there's that video that came out last week where he's like, I'm sick of people thinking that government spending money causes inflation. It doesn't. It's a lie. And he's like, obviously just making statements that aren't backed by any fact or truth. And people aren't like, if you study like marketing, copywriting, attention, like the more complex you make things, and the truth is complex, right? So you need to make things complex to get to the truth. But the more complex you make things and you explain things, then the less attention you get. The things that get the most attention are simple narratives that aren't necessarily true, but they're very easy to understand. Like that's why these like simple analogies catch on. They're not, and you have like with Bitcoin and the analogies, right? You have the crew of like Bitcoin analogies are stupid because they don't describe Bitcoin properly, and then you have the people who are pushing the analogies because it helps. They are true to a certain like level, right? There's a bit of them that are true. It's not fully reflective of what Bitcoin is, but Bitcoin is kind of like digital gold. it's not exactly the same as like just gold in a digital form, but it explains an aspect of it. Like Bitcoin is energy in a way. Bitcoin is whatever in a way, but it's not fully encompassing of the explanation. Um, I don't even know where I was going with that. I've lost my train of thought.
We were just talking about how, the
Oh,
inflation is.
narratives, narratives, right? So unfortunately, things that don't fully describe the whole truth, or fully describe the way something actually is, work. And this is why a narrative like Russia is called, the Russia going to war with Ukraine is what's causing inflation, is a really easy narrative to sell. And also because everyone like hates Russia right now, they're public enemy number one. It's easy to use them as a scapegoat and blame them for everything. Right. And then, there's people that think, there's so many people, and I used to be like this, that think that you're cultured and knowledgeable because you read the news. Like you keep up with current events, because there's people like who don't know who the president of Russia is, or they don't keep up with like current events and politics and economics. That's like all too fancy, right? And then there's people who do that and they think they're really smart, and then there's the people who've unplugged for the matrix completely.
Oh, 100%. And I think,
Yeah.
part of it might be through like education. I know when I was in high school, like my history and like economics class, like we would have to do a current event every week. And that was like part of our homework, where we would have to go and read a news article. And didn't matter which one, we would have to read a news article and just write like a summary on it. And of course, the news, and especially in the United States, has big biases wherever you read it from. And so, that's just kind of starting the whole brainwashing cycle in early on in high school. And then, you get to college and it's kind of like the same thing. And if you have those type of majors, or you have to take, all these kind of general education courses where, you have to get into the weeds of this, like that's, you go into a professor's class and you go into office hours, like 90% of them have like some sort of CNN or some kind of tab like that open, because that's exactly it. They think that they're getting educated by reading these news articles, and when really it's just people who have a 4-year degree in writing, or I don't even know what the degree would be called anymore. It's escaping me, but the 4-year degree, and then they're just doing their own personal research and all that, and writing about it, and the people don't think that these writers don't have any sort of agenda behind it either, or aren't getting paid for it or some reason like that. So yeah, I think it's just kind of a bad cycle that we're in the United States, and globally as well. But I think more and more people are kind of opening up to the fact that these news outlets aren't necessarily there to give you the best information, that they're there to kind of give you their own swayed opinion. And I think the clickbait headlines are kind of becoming more and more evident, and people are sort of waking up to it. At least in my opinion, I think a lot of my friends are getting a lot of their news from things like this, mediums like podcast, and maybe some sort of like blog from somebody that they like or know or something, opposed to the mainstream media.
Yeah, I mean, there's an element of like, and I don't know if this is just well, it's obviously not just in Bitcoin, but this is where I see it because I just spent all my time in the Bitcoin world. But there is like an element of where uh, anti whatever the main narrative is now, right? Everyone's like, if it's like everyone's for Ukraine, like going against Russia for Ukraine, then there's also this anti narrative that it's like it's not that black and white, and like actually the West has done some bad things that's pushed Russia into, which is actually the truth, right? But some people just take the opposite view to the mainstream as like a ideological standpoint without that much reasoning as well. And I think a lot of what's happening now is like there's a very strong wave of anti-mainstream stuff. It's like it's like it's like every era has had this like this sort of wave. Like punk rock was kind of like this, or like hip hop, or like skater culture is like anti-mainstream, anti-establishment. Except now with the internet, uh, you know, you're able to gather that community online versus before it would just be small pockets in each city of people that hang out together. Now we're all hanging out together online, so we seem a lot bigger because I guess we're just united in one large group. And it's
Yeah.
awesome. It's good to have these like it's good to have the internet and relatively free access or freer access to information than there was before. You know, because I know the internet still there's still gatekeepers and stuff. It's not perfect.
Yeah, of course, and yeah, there has been some cases of censorship and things like that on the internet fairly recently as well. But I think yeah, like you said, there's more not open source, but mediums like Twitter where you're able to communicate ideas. Obviously that's how we met is through Twitter, and I think a lot of the Bitcoin Twitter community too. You can spread a lot of great ideas, and I've learned a lot from just simply being on Twitter. Probably more so about economics of being on Twitter than and finding people posting blog articles and things like that, other than actually in class. So yeah, it's been overall a good experience for me. But let's get into the Fed, the United States Federal Reserve raising rates to 0.25. So this happened on Wednesday, March 16th. So like 2 days prior to this recording. They raised it from about they have a range of 0 to 0.25 to about 2.5 to 5%. And so the stock market kind of reacted, so it was relatively stagnant, and Bitcoin also stayed relatively even, actually increased about 3% from the time I last checked. So it seemed like the interest rates didn't drastically affect the price action of Bitcoin. And for me, I see this as extremely bullish because obviously Bitcoin is very decentralized. It's not run by any government or single entity. Um, but and one single entity like the Fed, although the United States dollar is a global reserve currency, increasing that interest rate by 0.25% really didn't do much overall to the Bitcoin price action. So what do you think about the Fed interest rates increasing and how that kind of overall affects Bitcoin?
Well, I think it wasn't a surprise. Well, it actually was probably a surprise because there was a lot of remember in our spaces when I was in Portugal, we had that really long rip that was like 4 hours long, and there was a lot of people that were like, "There's no way they're raising interest rates even once. Like, no chance." Everyone's laughing at them. Like, I always thought they would at least get one in there, um, and I think that the market's already priced in these things. Like we had a bit of a dump, maybe a month and a half, 2 months ago, right? Um, and that was when the narrative switched from like no rate rises until 2023, 2024 to like, oh, we're gonna raise rates 4, 5, 6, 7 times this year. So when that narrative shifted, um, and I think it came from them claiming that inflation was going to be transitory, so there's no need to raise interest rates because inflation is going to go down, to like realizing, holy shit, we're like in danger of like some hyperinflation going down. So it's already priced in, and that's why I think Bitcoin hasn't reacted negatively. Um, so I agree with you. It's super bullish. We're having a little bit of a pump right now, 41.2. So yeah, not a surprise. I think at this point, whether they do any more rate rises remains to be seen. I'm blending into my background here, aren't I? Hold on.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Let's see if I can remove it.
But I had Deer Point Macro. I do another spaces on Tuesday nights, and it's mostly with people who have been in the I guess analyzing the macro environment. And I think that they all bring a very unique perspective because they all understand the issues related to the overall macro environment and the fiat world, so to speak, but they're not Bitcoiners. So they see a lot of like issues with converting to Bitcoin, moving from the US dollar and et cetera, et cetera. So they bring up a lot of good points about moving from like the US dollar as a global reserve currency to the Bitcoin standard. But yeah, I had Deer Point Macro on there, and he basically was saying that based on the data that he's seeing and analyzing, he says that uh, he thinks that there's going to be at least 3 rate raises this year. The Fed, after they announced it, they predicted, I believe they predicted 6, and they're going to bring the interest rate up to like 1.9% by the end of this year, and then they're going to do 3 more rate raises in 2023. But overall, for somebody that has been working in this space for quite a long time, um, he was saying even from his perspective, it's not surprising that they raised it slightly, but they're not going to get up to the guarantee of what they had. So I think as far as like Bitcoin Twitter goes and everybody in the Bitcoin space, there are some people that are very knowledgeable on the overall macro environment, but um, I think that there's still some things that the Fed is going to try to do to combat inflation, and one of those things is raise interest rates, and they're not going to be able to avoid completely not raising rates. So I agree with you there. So I'm not surprised that they did it here, but I also think that they're going to have to minimize it because right now we've had a semi all right you know reaction to it as far as like the stock market goes and Bitcoin market, as far as like the price action. But I think long term, it's definitely not good to have this massive amount of inflation, and they're going to have to try to do something. And I think that something is just raise rates, but they're not going to be able to do it as much as they're saying it right now. So
I
yeah,
mean, is 1 point, if they get to 1.9% interest, is that really enough to do to even make a dent in what's going on? If inflation's like, what was it, 7.9% or whatever, it's presumably going to go higher. So I just don't see how 1.9 does anything. So and like how 0.25, I think the actual the sort of fear of like just the fact that they said we're going to raise rates, which is different to the narrative of we're not going to raise rates until 2024. That's what sort of brought the fear or a little bit of uncertainty or panic into the markets. The actual impact of a 0.25% rate rise, or even several rate rises that take us to like a 1.9% interest rate, the actual impact fundamentally is negligible in the current environment. So yeah, and particularly with the geopolitical situation, I just don't see how that brings prices of anything down. I think if anything, uh, if we go by Arthur Hayes' article, like we have no idea what the second, third order effects of all these of this like financial war against Russia is going to be. And if it now looks like, I've been reading headlines on Zero Hedge and Walter Bloomberg, saying that China is thinking about backing Russia militarily.
yeah,
That
I
would
did
be
see something.
insane.
Yeah, I did see something like.
Imagine if the US like just, I don't actually know logistically how you can cancel someone's like, I guess you just like default on the treasury bills held by China, right? You just say your treasury bills, we're not going to pay them back. So they're worthless,
Yeah, I mean,
right?
honestly, I don't know how that'll all play out, but it also worries me too because we're having this supply chain issue right now as it stands, and a lot of the semiconductors that we receive at least in the United States
Oh,
are from
everywhere.
Taiwan. Yeah, and so
Everywhere.
that'll cause another big global issue, and yeah, so overall, it just wouldn't be a great. Yeah, Joey's in the crowd, and he says they pulled treasury. So China holds somewhere between 3 to 4 trillion
Yeah.
of USD in their treasuries, so
Yeah.
that they would hold it. Yeah.
Well,
So
you can bet, a whole Bitcoin that they are dumping that shit as we speak. And, whether they're like just stockpiling, or all these countries are just going to start stockpiling oil, gold, wheat, ammonia, whatever it is, like all these commodities, and they're going to dump treasuries like you've never seen before. And that's just going to mean that the Fed's going to have to buy up. The Fed's going to be the buyer of first and last resort of U.S. treasuries. Um,
yeah, exactly. But I mean, the interesting thing is too is like when I have these like macro guys on as well in my space, I keep kind of reverting back to them. But they say, if you look back for the past like 10 or 15 years, you kind of see a trend in a lot of headlines of and Russia and China buying up commodities and getting out the U.S. dollar because they kind of see the writing on the wall. And this whole COVID situation where the United States decided to print a ton of money, and are causing massive amounts of inflation. China and Russia have kind of been preparing for it, and it seems like eventually they're gonna obviously get out of it, and they were preparing for something in the future, and kind of getting away from that too. So,
I mean, China in particular is investing in infrastructure in countries that are resource rich, particularly in Africa. They have a lot of influence, although it's waning a bit because I think Australia's tried to distance itself, or at least like sort of cut off its dependency on Chinese natural resources. But I think Australia is heavily dependent on some Chinese natural resources and also on selling China its own natural resources as well. But you see China going into Africa and investing, through Belt and Road, and that way it's basically like buying equity stakes in very important infrastructure and natural resource projects and just general important infrastructure in African countries. And then when those countries can't pay back the investment or whatever, China just goes, okay, well, now we take this port, now we take this railroad, now we take this oil reserve, or this oil field, or we take this, and then bam, they like you suddenly have. And I'm not sure if they're doing this because like China's not really interested in making the yuan the world reserve currency, so it's quite likely that they're sort of like they're aiming to gain financial influence over the world just by owning infrastructure and assets rather than by like everyone using the yuan as the world reserve currency, because then they would have to open up their capital markets and let the yuan free float, which they don't want to do, because they don't want the yuan to appreciate massively. Otherwise, they don't become the world's factory of making cheap goods, if the yuan appreciates too much.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
the Canadian Bitcoiners rose a good question. They said the last time the US defaulted on their debt, gold spiked. What do you think will happen if to Bitcoin if this plays out again?
I mean, in the short run, I probably it would tank. I think like Bitcoin trades very much like a risk on asset, so it's treated like sort of like a high growth tech stock. Um, so we need the digital gold narrative to be pervasive in mainstream, for Bitcoin to be repriced as a risk off asset. But that's where the massive opportunity rises, right? Because it is a risk off asset. It is a safe haven, uh, and the longer people don't realize that, whilst it's necessary, the better it is for all those of us that do realize that. And so let it trade like a risk on asset. Let it tank. We can scoop as much of it as we want, and then when the world, because remember, Bitcoiners are just like 2 to 5 years ahead of everyone else, right? We're just seeing we see what's going to happen, and no one else realizes it until it actually slaps them in the face. So let it trade like a risk on asset. Let it dump. Let's buy as much as we can for ourselves, and then let it be repriced as risk off, when the shit really hits the fan.
Yeah, there you go. Now, you can swear on this program, Gandalf. This is not a children's program. You're
I
getting
saw, right? I
chirped.
said shit.
Yeah, but you were getting chirped for saying heck earlier. So you could say hell, you could say
Was
fuck,
I
whatever.
getting? I was getting trolled.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
This isn't the Canadian
I said
Bitcoin
heck.
podcast. You can swear on this one.
No children.
Yeah, no children. All right, well, let's move on to another topic that I saw on Twitter. I don't know if you noticed this. If you're plugged into Bitcoin Twitter, you might not have seen. I've seen this kind of on like the outskirts, but I've seen quite a few U.S. politicians say, "I'm running for U.S. Senate, and I believe in Bitcoin." And I've even seen another account kind of reply back to them, say, "You created this account about a week ago." And he created this account about a week ago just to tweet about Bitcoin and gain a following. And so a lot of these politicians in the United States are gaining a lot of traction on Twitter after tweeting about Bitcoin and saying how all their policies are going to, drastically improve Bitcoin or help Bitcoin, yada, yada, yada. I'd like to hear your opinion on it. Then I'll give my little rant, I guess, on it.
Fucking LARPers. Look, most of them are parroting a narrative because they think that's going to get them votes. That's it. Like they've learned 3 or 4 talking points. L- Think about the audience they're speaking to, right? They're speaking to the mainstream person that understands nothing, holds the politician up on a pedestal. They think politician is some super smart person that knows exactly what they're talking about, everything, and like they're just taking what they say at face value. Um, I mean, in a way, it's like, is it better that they are at least pretending to support Bitcoin, or at least like they're pandering to Bitcoiners for the vote? Is that better than if they didn't, or if they hated Bitcoin? Quite possibly. Um, but it's not going to lead anywhere. It's not going to lead to truth. right? It's not going to lead anywhere that I think we want to go. All it's going to do is it's going to make us vote for people based on a single issue, probably blinding us to the negative aspects of those politicians, and then they're going to come into power, and then they're just going to really do what they always do. Um, the system the system is too strong for any one person or even any group of politicians to change it. You can see that in the fact that, like, we switch, like, well, in the US and a whole bunch of other democracies, they switch between two opposing parties, and they both do the same thing. They print money, and they yeah, they just basically, politics is about winning votes. And how do you win votes? You give people free shit. It's marketing 101 as well, right? If you give people free shit, you give them free trials, you give them do giveaways, that attracts people. People want free stuff. And it's the same with the general population. It's the same with, like, when you grow the state so big that it's one of the largest employers of people in the country, you can't reduce the size of the state because that's just extremely unpopular. You're not gonna win the vote by saying, "Hey, civil servants, I'm gonna fire half of you. Like, half of you are gonna be unemployed. We'll cut the deficit though. We'll have less debt. That doesn't affect you today. Like, you don't care about the debt today. It doesn't make any difference. You care about having a fucking job." So the state is just it's just politics in the state. The incentives are so fucked, and I just don't really trust any of them. I think they have good intentions, but intentions mean fuck all if you can't execute on what needs to be done.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you 100% here. I think that they're all, you got to be very, very cautious with who you're voting for and kind of the issues that they're presenting, right? Because I agree. I think a lot of them are pandering to the Bitcoin crowd, and they're trying to get votes for people on a single issue. And they kind of see the trend of Bitcoin, but I think it's deeper than that. I think you need to look at if a politician's really following the Bitcoin ethos. My former co-host was really big on the New York State mayor who accepted half of his paycheck in Bitcoin, and then he increased the mask mandates in New York. So, for me, I don't really agree with that because it's really against the Bitcoin ethos and like the freedom of that Bitcoin offers. So from there, it's kind of similar in a few other states, right? So we've seen a lot of the southern states like Texas, Florida, Tennessee, Wyoming, South Dakota be very friendly to Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining, using the energy and things like that. In fact, I think Texas even like encouraged Bitcoin mining because it helped with the grid after they had like that big snowstorm this past year, I believe it was winter, where their grid got shut off and everything like that. Um, but where we're seeing states that have been very much lockdown heavy and against freedom and more about censorship and things like that. States that come to mind are like Illinois and Georgia, where now they're seeing such a big market of Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining that they're saying like, hey, we're going to give you tax breaks if you come here. We're going to do this to help incentivize people to move here. But I think, overall people, that affects some, but a lot of people understand, the overall overarching, um, politics and how a lot of these policies affect them from the day to day. So, at least in the United States, we're seeing a lot of people vote, quote unquote, with their legs. We're seeing a lot of people flee states like California and New York and move to a lot of these southern states, not only because of the weather and because it's, a little bit nicer. I mean, California, by all accounts, has great weather, but the policies and everything like that have turned it and made it very, very difficult to live there and afford to live there too. And so, yeah, I think I'm for one extremely wary about any time a politician says anything. I think that they're no matter what side they're on, they're probably lying or at least fudging the truth, or it's very very rehearsed, and that makes it a little more dangerous because they're trying to either play to your emotions or get you to sway you based on like you said, a single issue. So I think we've also seen I think Bitcoin Magazine had a Twitter Spaces with a guy named Josh Mandel, who I can't remember what exactly he's running for, but he's running for something in Ohio. And they had some technical issues on there, and I know in the crowd, me, Dan, and Joey and Len from the Canadian Bitcoiners podcast, we were all listening to that, and kind of texting around, and he would say the same thing like 2 or 3 times because it's obviously like this line that he's rehearsed that he wants to people to get stuck around, and so just simply from that, it makes you wary about what he's what his real um I guess intentions are. But
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean,
I
politicians look, politicians aren't gonna give politicians aren't a way for the individual to take power back into their own hands. Like voting for a specific politician is not gonna give the power back to the individual. What you have to do as an individual is take power back. And the way you take control or power back is you vote with your feet, you live where you're treated best because you're incentivizing that treatment by rewarding it with your presence and your economic activity in a given physical location. And then you need to buy Bitcoin, buy and hold your wealth in Bitcoin so that nobody can control it. And those are the two probably most powerful things that you can do if you want to instigate like a systemic change. That's how you do it. It isn't voting for Erica Rhodes or XYZ politician or whatever. Maybe you can do that too, and it has a little bit of a difference because we'd rather maybe have Erica's better than Brad Sherman or whoever she's trying to replace, right? But
yeah,
she's also she's playing in the same game, right? You can't change the rule if you want to play like if you're playing you're not going to go on an American football field and win an American football game by playing volleyball rules because that's just not how it works. You have to play American football rules, and American football rules have certain restrictions, certain things you can't do. You want to like throw the ball up in the air and like volley it. You can't do that in American football, but maybe that's what needs to happen in the world. And so you need to play a whole different game. You can't if you enter the game of politics, you're constrained by the incentive structure of the system of politics, and you'll end up doing what everyone else is doing. Like if you come in and you think like every politician has done it wrong, they're all idiots. Guess what happens? Everyone just does the same thing because it's about the game. It's about the system. You're a pawn of the system as a politician. You're not making or controlling the system. It is controlling you.
oh, 100%. And I
Yeah.
mean, the system has been broken for quite a long time, especially the two-party system in the United States. So it's like, the narrative since maybe 2016, the past two elections that I've been, able to vote in at least. They've the narrative has been like, all right, we have two bad choices. It's either bad or worse, and that's what kind of how people viewed it. And it's really a shame that's being the narrative when the United States tries to be or tries to claim to be like the greatest country on earth. So if that's the case and we're such a great country, why can't we find somebody that majority of people feel some type positively about? But it seems like no matter what, whoever the president is in the United States, half the country's going to hate them anyway. So it's just kind of it's kind of how it is now. And yeah, like you said, it's all a system, and every politician is just essentially a pawn in it. So it's just pieces moving around, and the American people and globally are just being drastically affected by it. So it's kind of unfortunate that this is the way it's going, and it needs a drastic change. How that's going to happen, or if that's going to happen, I don't see it happening anytime soon, because anytime anything happens in the United States government, it takes forever to get passed unless it's something that involves maybe a jab or two here or there. So I'm
Yeah.
gonna get it from that one. But
I mean, in a way, it's a good thing because you don't want like the fate of a nation to be dependent on a single person. You don't want a single person to have that much power. That's sort of like what happens in dictatorships, right? Where it's like about the dictator rather than the system itself. The dictator is the system. So at least in the U.S., you have a thing where it's like you can just put anyone there, and it's a relatively. I know where unplugging from the matrix and being a Bitcoiner can be a bit depressing sometimes because, um, yeah, you hear a lot of people, talk about Bitcoin as hope and Bitcoin, but at the same time, you see the world for the messy place that it is, and it can be a little bit depressing and make you feel a bit hopeless. But if you think about it, like the U.S. is generally a great country. Like people aren't there. I know that there's problems and stuff, but that you have opportunities to do well for yourself. You have opportunities to get ahead, start a business, have a career, get an education. You've clean running water, relatively fresh air to breathe, countryside. Like there's a lot of good stuff too. We just tend to focus on all the shitty stuff, and it can make the world just seem really really bad. But go live in a place that's not as advanced as the US, or just less economically fortunate, and you understand like how lucky, how good we have it over in the West. So it in a way, it's a good thing that the system works to the level of that it does now. Um, Improvements can definitely be made there.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, definitely. All right, well, let's get into I guess a little bit more policies going on in Europe, or no, in the Asia. I don't know where the Ukraine is, but anyway, Ukraine
Europe.
works to legalize Bitcoin and crypto. So, it's been very popularized that Ukraine has been accepting donations in Bitcoin and in crypto. There's been some flack with like the CEO of Polkadot, only donating or seeming to only donate if the Ukraine accepts them in Polkadot. But essentially, the Ukraine is looking to legalize all Bitcoin and cryptocurrency regulations as donations have rolled in to help Ukraine's effort to stay a sovereign nation. So me personally, I don't think this really comes as a surprise, but if I guess if there's any kind of bright spot in what's going on over there, it's like, it's helping. I guess I don't know if this is great to say, but it's helping adoption. It's showing the use case of a central bank can't necessarily shut down transactions from point A to the Ukraine, and yeah, everybody seems to be extremely generous as they're going on, and they're helping the Ukraine in any way possible. So yeah, what do you think about the Ukraine kind of I guess legalizing Bitcoin and crypto transactions?
I'm always like, so having working on BTC Times, I've just been more like aware of what the media says and how the media presents certain news. And one of the things is like you see like, oh, such and such country is legalizing crypto, right? Or it's like, but it wasn't illegal there. So it's not being legalized, right? There's just some regulatory framework that's being put in place around Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, but they weren't illegal. So saying they're legalized is, I think, just like sensationalist, making it seem like, oh, now, now they're finally legitimized or whatever. They were already like being used. Ukraine was already receiving uh, donations in Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. I mean, a side note on that, the shitcoiners really made themselves look real bad with Justin's son crying about Tron users not receiving an NFT airdrop that Ukraine. I mean, what the fuck is Ukraine doing anyway, trying to like airdrop an NFT? I know they're trying to seem hip and stuff. The Ukrainian propaganda, war propaganda, has been fantastic, and people are lapping it up because I mean, I'm in Scotland. There's like there's people flying Ukrainian flags out their windows here. Um, it's nice. I think it's a good, the intentions behind like showing solidarity with Ukrainians is nice, but it's also a lot of virtue signaling, which I don't really like. What's the what's the
Oh,
comment?
sorry. Yeah, so the Canadian Bitcoiners are chirping me because I was unaware of where Ukraine. So, um, can't do
Classic
this.
American, Brandon. Classic
Yeah, you can't
American.
get this kind of content anywhere else, I mean, I'm just here. I'm a guy. I mean, it's the day after St. Patrick's Day, and I'm coming and I'm bringing you
Do
guys a
you,
newsletter. I'm bringing, a live stream, and I'm bringing audio. But it's neither here nor there. I'm out here grinding, but it's whatever. It's whatever. Where's Scotland?
do you know where Ireland is?
Yeah, I do. Like,
It's in Boston.
yeah, exactly. It's a bar right down the street.
Yeah, Irish, Irish
Yeah,
whiskeys.
yeah,
Right.
exactly. They
Yeah,
have a
I
lot of
mean,
kids there.
the it's amazing. I was thinking about it today actually. Like last year, we had a country announce that they were making Bitcoin legal tender, and I think the price of Bitcoin went from like 32 to 34K or something. Like no one gave a, generally speaking, no one gave a fuck, right? And then you have Elon Musk tweeting that Tesla buys $1.5 billion of Bitcoin, and Bitcoin goes from 32,000 to 48,000 or whatever it did, like massive fucking jump in like a week, right? So it just goes to show like the power of the meme, the power of like media, the power of like I guess a reputation, how much better of a reputation like the El Salvador thing is way bigger than Tesla buying Bitcoin, in my opinion, fundamentally, right? Uh, you potentially have a country that's opened the door to like multiple nation states following in their footsteps. Whereas like Tesla is not really opening the door for companies to own Bitcoin. I think MicroStrategy did that first. And it's obviously also not even really catching on so much yet. Um, so it's not like we've seen there was that period of like months where we're every like quarterly earning report, like, oh, is Microsoft going to announce bought Bitcoin? Is Amazon's, Twitter, Facebook, like all the big Netflix, nothing, zilch, nada. Um, and then we have like now rumors of more countries coming to make Bitcoin legal tender states. Like there's politicians, there's so much going on with Bitcoin, and we're still at 41K.
Yeah,
So
exactly. I think
um
I saw like Brazil and Mexico are probably going to be two of the closest countries to make it Bitcoin legal tender, and then Argentina just got Strike able or has the ability
mm,
to. I don't know. Strike is now in Argentina, and that's
yep.
how it started in El Salvador. So it'll be interesting to see. And then speaking of El Salvador, they also announced recently that they're going to start making some changes and some improvements to the Chivo wallet. So the Chivo wallet is they partnered with the El Salvadorian government to allow citizens to hold and transact Bitcoin, but there's kind of been some major issues which may have affected adoption in the country. So there's been 4 million downloads, which is very encouraging, but only 100,000 of those 4 million are active users. So yeah, like I
Yeah.
said, it seems like it's kind of been hurting it, but it's encouraging to me that Bukele is very active on Twitter. Bukele is very much in the hip Bitcoin space and Bitcoin Twitter. He understands all the ethos and everything behind it, and he seems to be doubling down at every corner, right? So he's making a almost like a risky, not very popular play. We have the IMF kind of coming at El Salvador and everything like that. The United States announcing that they're going to investigate El Salvador. But at every corner, he seems to be like, yeah, fuck them. I'm going to do what I think is best for my country. And I'm going to keep going at it. And
Excuse me.
yeah, he's been going back and forth and with everybody on Twitter and just calling out politicians globally, which is insane to see that we're all seeing it on Twitter as well. But yeah, what do you think about the improvements that's going to be made in to the Chivo wallet? And I guess we kind of touched on El Salvador as a whole, but if you want to dive in a little bit more on that.
Yeah, I mean, so I for those for the audience, I've been to El Salvador, and so I've seen firsthand like, and when did I go? November 2021. So I think it was like just a month or two after Bitcoin became like officially legal tender. I think the legal tender like kicked in September 16th or something, or it was sometime in September, I think. So I've been down there. And the 4 million downloads of Chivo wallet, but only 100,000 active users makes total sense because the government gave everyone $30 of free Bitcoin. In a country where the average salary is like 400 US a month or something, or 380 US a month, 30 bucks is a lot. So of course everyone downloaded it. They all wanted the free money, right? Everyone went and they spent the money. I talked to like, taxi drivers and shopkeepers and stuff, and I asked them if they use Bitcoin, what do they do? Did they keep the Bitcoin? Do they just general chat to get a feel for what their understanding of Bitcoin is? And everyone just told me they spent the Bitcoin. They changed it to dollars. They used it to pay their like electricity bill that month, or they did their week's grocery shopping. Um, there was one guy that said he was using Bitcoin to send money to someone in like a family member in the US, or that like his family in the US was using it to send money to his mom in El Salvador, and they were saving like, tens of dollars in monthly fees. If they're sending her $200 a month or something, he's like, before we were paying $20 or $30 in fees, and now we pay nothing. So that's great. But you're implementing a money. Think about how many people understand Bitcoin just generally in the world right now. Not very many. So you're rolling it out in a place that's just generally like economically underdeveloped. The people are just generally undereducated, and expecting it to just be like, oh, everyone gets Bitcoin there and they all use it and stuff. Like, no one gets it. Most places don't take it because they haven't set up the infrastructure. So I think there's a lot of education that needs to happen. And the way that happens is like from grassroots level up. It's not going to be government coordinated education unless they start like, they do a class where they teach you about money at school, which I highly doubt, and that's going to take like 2 decades to permeate the entire society. It has to be people going down to El Salvador using Bitcoin and basically one to one to one to one to one educating everyone that you come into contact with about what Bitcoin is. You pay them in Bitcoin. You try to have a simple to understand like 3 or 4 sentence like narrative as to why Bitcoin is good money, and that's how it's gonna play out. I mean, if lots of people, there has to be like an aligned incentive or benefit. So lots of people go to El Salvador, and there's a narrative that like Bitcoin is attracting tourism to El Salvador and it's making people go there and spend money, and that's just been good for the general population because the businesses have been able to make more money. It's created more jobs, then that's a good thing for Bitcoin. But it requires it to work in terms of attracting capital and people to visit El Salvador. I think it is though. It seems to be.
Well, yeah, it definitely seems to be as well to me as well. I know, I'm on Bitcoin Twitter, and it seems like a lot of people are going to El Salvador to visit and for conferences. They had the big Bitcoin conference and everything like that as well. I mean, you went. Did you ever go to El Salvador before, or did you ever plan on ever going to El Salvador before the conference there?
No, absolutely not. I don't think I would have ever even really have thought about the country other than if I was like playing, a game where I have to name every country in the world and El Salvador just pops up. Otherwise, I would have never probably thought of it. And but I will say one thing, like going down there, the people were amazing, like so friendly, so generous, so kind. Like I was not I traveled around, I drove like, hour and a half out of San Salvador. I went to Zonte, like everyone was super nice. I never felt scared or like I was in danger because I think one of the sort of perceptions of El Salvador is that it is a very dangerous place, and I think it did have like at one point the highest homicide rate in South America, or in Central in America, the Americas, or in the world, or something like some ridiculous high rate of homicides, and the president often like tweets stats about like, oh, there was no homicides today, like that's a good thing. Um, but yeah, it was amazing. I highly recommend, especially for people who live over on that side of the world, like to make a trip to see what it's like to go to a country where Bitcoin is legal tender. Like, I don't think as Bitcoiners, we really appreciate the magnitude of the fact that like Bitcoin is fucking legal tender in a country. That's insane. So, um, getting down there to visit it is probably just it's like a moment in history, right? You're going to a place where potentially something that's going to permeate throughout the entire world first happened. Or it could die. Like, Bukele could not be voted in as the next president, and the next president says, like, I'm taking Bitcoin as legal tender. Bitcoin could be a failed experiment that doesn't take off, doesn't become legal tender anywhere. And so you might just have this one opportunity to go somewhere and experience it being being legal tender. So, success is not guaranteed. I think we think that Bitcoin has already won, and that's a meme, and even I say it, right? But it's not guaranteed.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's like kind of one thing that, you get into the Bitcoin Twitter. And I don't want to call it like an echo chamber or anything like that, but a lot.
It is an echo chamber.
Yeah, and
It is an echo chamber.
a lot of people just that's why I kind of like to talk to some of these other other macro guys, because their counter to all of it is like, well, El Salvador is like essentially a third world country. It's a very small amount of people. They're getting away from the United States dollar, but at the same time, United States dollar is still legal tender there. It's still a source of medium, and most people there have kind of we see all the bear articles, right, where they say it's not being really adopted or anything like that. People still prefer the dollar, and
That's
yeah,
100% true.
I mean, yeah, but I also see there's a lot of positives that have happened positives that have happened because of it, and I think the tourism is definitely one of them. I think I've seen a couple people on Twitter. One of them, I want to say, opened up like maybe like a dentist office or something like that, and she was
Yeah,
a full
Susie.
on. Yeah, she's a full-on
Yeah.
Bitcoiner. And then, we've heard about the country of El Salvador opening up like a new veterinary hospital because of their move, or they at least credit it to their move to Bitcoin as legal tender. So, definitely a lot of positives that have come out of it. And I think
I think
overall just more press too.
it's
And
a
I
net.
don't.
It's definitely a net positive, right? You can argue all the arguments that El Salvador is a third world country and it's a small economy and it's not a big impact on the world. It doesn't have a big impact on the world stage. Completely agree with those things. But is it better than just having the dollar? I would say so. Like I would say definitely the the benefit to El Salvador of adopting Bitcoin, think about MicroStrategy as well. It's the same thing, right? Nobody knew who Michael Saylor or MicroStrategy was before they decided to buy Bitcoin, right? And not only has it had like a massively positive impact on them as a company in terms of like now they have a really good treasury reserve asset that's gone up in value fourfold since they first started buying it. Actually, they're buying so aggressively, they're like 30K average price, but they're still up. That's 25% or whatever it is, or 30% in a year and a half. It's not bad. Better than a kick in the balls. Um, uh, but now everyone knows who MicroStrategy is, right? And everyone knows who Michael Saylor is, and that having that attention, that reach, I'm sure has helped them grow their core business, get more clients, um, and it's put them on the map. And it's put El Salvador on the map. No pun intended, but it like literally has. So it's definitely a net positive. Has it been this like monetary revolution that's changed the world? No, but it's been great for them, and it's great for Bitcoin so far as well.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm going to put you here on the spot because Dan and I have talked about this a lot privately.
Mm.
Every time we see an interview from Michael Saylor, we see him go on the same kind of a similar 2 to 3 hour rant about Bitcoin, what Bitcoin is, like the positives of it. But I have no idea what MicroStrategy actually does. Do you know what MicroStrategy, like the company, actually does? Because he never goes out and actually talks about his company. Like he's a great spokesperson for Bitcoin. We got the Canadian Bitcoiners in the chat saying that as well, and I definitely agree with that. But at the same time, like, why would I invest in MicroStrategy and not in Bitcoin? I guess give me your best I guess view on that.
Okay, so so there's two questions. What does MicroStrategy do? And then there's a second question. Why would I invest in MicroStrategy and not Bitcoin?
Yeah.
So MicroStrategy, the fact that you're even number one, like before, you didn't even know that you didn't know that MicroStrategy existed. They weren't in. It's not like, oh, MicroStrategy is this thing, but I don't know who they are. That's you now, right? Before it was you didn't even know that MicroStrategy existed, because it was like they're not even in the realm of reality. You have no idea they exist. So now you're aware of them. You're asking a question of what do they do, right? So we're about to, like, Michael Saylor bangs on about Bitcoin and doesn't talk about MicroStrategy, but he's doing like the one-on-one sales pitch, but using media to reach millions of people every time he does the pitch. But every time he speaks on any medium, you can guarantee there's like tens of thousands of people who haven't heard him speak before. It's the first time that they're hearing him speak. So this is why he knows this. He knows he just needs to hammer away the message, right, about Bitcoin. And he doesn't need to directly speak about MicroStrategy, because by speaking about Bitcoin and presenting as the CEO of MicroStrategy and they've bought Bitcoin, then that's just going to attract attention. People like you asking, and people like the Canadian Bitcoiners podcast, what does MicroStrategy do? So I actually know someone who worked at MicroStrategy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, used to work at MicroStrategy. So they're a business intelligence company. They basically, I think what they do is they come in and they help you take information that you have about your business, whether it's like clients or whatever, and then they help you build like software that lets you analyze the data and use it to make change in the business. So like, I don't know, I guess like you can analyze like foot traffic if you're a mall operator, or like, if you're a supermarket, you can analyze like what products get bought the most, and like they just help you build custom software to meet your specific business and analytical needs. As I understand it, that's what they do. So, and I think
Okay.
they compete with like Oracle and forgot the other name of it, but those
Okay.
kinds of companies. But I think yeah, business intelligence. I know that's a very like opaque term. It doesn't really
Yeah.
what does that even mean? But yeah, it's basically I think just they take data and they build a software system and a database that allows you to analyze and use that data to make business decisions,
Gotcha.
right?
All right.
So that's what they do. And I didn't know MicroStrategy existed before either. So,
Yeah.
but
All
yeah.
right. That's fair.
And then second question, why would you buy Bitcoin? Sorry, why would you buy MicroStrategy instead of Bitcoin? To me, MicroStrategy is basically a proxy to Bitcoin, right? And I would not buy MicroStrategy instead of Bitcoin. If there was completely free markets and it didn't make a difference, there was no like there was no sort of like regulatory or like account advantages to buying one over the other, I would always just buy and hold Bitcoin. But I understand that there's people that like, they want to put they 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 have a savings or an investment plan that only allows them to put equity in. There's institutions that can't buy Bitcoin. So there are specific players or investors that will use MicroStrategy, and it makes sense for them to use MicroStrategy as a proxy to Bitcoin. But if you're an individual that can like, you can put Bitcoin in an IRA like you can in the or a Roth IRA like you can in the US, and you can hold your own keys with is it choice?
Yeah. With
Yep.
choice.
Give them a little
I think
shill.
there's a couple other products, yeah, that do
Yeah.
that,
So
but Choice we work with really closely, and Teaser, we actually have, Brian Harrington from Choice coming on next week, so, um,
amazing.
yeah, there we go.
Yeah. So, you know, if you can do that and like it's the same tax advantages as like holding stocks, then yeah, I would just hold, Bitcoin rather than a miner or whatever else. But if you understand the mining business and you think that you have an edge in picking mining stocks and you think they're going to outperform Bitcoin or there's a certain advantage to them over Bitcoin itself, or you have so much money that you want to hedge a little bit and you want to diversify, but concentrate, might make sense to buy. I know you guys like, you own stocks and you buy. I'm 100% Bitcoin. I'm trying to understand every aspect of Bitcoin really, 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 really well and deeply. And so I don't have the willingness nor the time to focus on anything else. Um, and it's just easy for me to just keep my net worth in Bitcoin. So that's why I do that, and that's why I hold Bitcoin versus other stuff. I don't want the execution risk, the human risk, the energy grid risk. There's a whole bunch of risks like in investing in other like Bitcoin proxies. I'd rather just hold the actual thing because that's what those companies are just there to get more Bitcoin, right?
Oh,
Miners
yeah.
are there to get more Bitcoin. They're all holding Bitcoin. They're not even selling the Bitcoin anymore. If they were selling the Bitcoin, it's a whole different ball game. But now they're just like they're a way to acquire Bitcoin without holding it directly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but I mean, from my perspective, I think like there's still some benefit for traditional equities like stocks and everything like that. And Yeah, I mean, for like certain accounts too, like my retirement account. Although I believe deeply in Bitcoin, and I think Bitcoin's going to go, going to take off and change a lot of things. I think in a an account that I'm investing more for the long term, um, like 30 plus years, it won't hurt me as much if I'm a little bit more diversified. Because I think that the narrative as far as like young investors go is like, you know, have a singular focus when you're to get wealthy and then kind of diversify to keep your wealth.
Mhm.
Um, and Yeah, so for an account like that, that's where I kind of more diversify and everything like that. But I mean, it's getting harder and harder for me to kind of go into stocks or in the stock market because, of the impending things that see on the table with, the incredible amount of inflation that we're seeing. And, the Fed probably going to be raising interest rates and going to tank the market too. So, we have Dan in the chat that says you don't need to study in stocks because stocks just always go up. And that's kind of like what your point was saying earlier about real estate, right? Like a lot of people don't really understand, breaking down stocks and things like that. They just, invest in an ETF and then they forget about it. And that's kind of like their easy way to do it. But I also think like, Bitcoin's kind of becoming that for a lot of people, especially the longer you get into it.
Yeah,
Um,
I think it's dangerous when you have a very large group of capital or a very large pool of capital that invests based on basically what is a meme, right? Real estate always goes up as a meme. Stocks always go up as are they're memes. They're
yeah,
not like those people don't understand the fundamentals. And when the market dislocates from fundamentals, uh, you can bet your ass that that it'll come crashing back down at some point. You know, you could see a 10-year bull run based on just like hopium and a meme, right? But eventually it all comes crashing down. Um, so I'm just very wary of of putting money where there's just like the capitals are flowing because of a meme narrative rather than the fundamentals. And I very much think like for Bitcoin, the majority of core strong holders are there because they understand the fundamentals of Bitcoin. Sure, you get some, you know, when number go up, when there's euphoria, that's why you have these blow off tops, because then it becomes about the meme, right? The like it's gone up 5x or whatever in a short period of time, and everyone piles in because they want to make money. And that's when you have like these, it goes to like, you know, 20K and then crashes back down to three,
yeah,
right? So not,
exactly.
um, but yeah, I come, I'm, and I'm not like advocating 100% Bitcoin position. I don't think like, I don't know if that's technically wise. And, you know, if I'm wrong, I've obliterated my entire wealth. But it's a risk I'm willing to take as well, because yeah, I just am. I like concentration. And like you said, you know, for wealth building, concentration, putting all your eggs in one basket and watching it very closely, understanding it, is what makes sense. And then later, once you want to protect your wealth, then you maybe spread it around, and you know, you can have an allocation of Bitcoin that you're happy with and have spare capital to invest in other things. But in the wealth building, I like the concentration approach.
Yeah, exactly. So I
There.
guess based on the fundamentals aspect, a big fundamental piece of Bitcoin is it's kind of like the privacy aspect of it, right? So when you make a transaction, it's wallet to wallet. You have the ID, but it's not necessarily connected to your name or anything like that, and you can get non KYC Bitcoin. And a strategy that's commonly used to get from KYC to seemingly non KYC is CoinJoin. So I don't know if you saw this, but Wasabi Wallet, they've decided to blacklist certain CoinJoin transactions because essentially that they'll be tracking certain blacklisted wallet addresses and won't let them to go through and do their coin joining feature on the Wasabi Wallet app. Um,
Mm.
so how do you, I guess, overall feel about this? It seems like a lot of governments, and there's a lot of external pressures on companies that are doing this, especially companies that are growing quickly. And it seems like a lot of these Bitcoin related companies are growing at a rapid pace, um, that they are basically are like, um, you need to enact this sort of I guess safeguard or analyze the people in this which way. And if you don't do this, then we're going to shut you down or hit you with some sort of lawsuit that'll affect the growth of the business long term, or at least maybe short term, because a big financial hit initially. So what do you think about I guess the regulations being put on a lot of these Bitcoin related companies?
So, when the news first came out, everyone assumed that there was some sort of regulatory pressure, or that Wasabi Wallet was being forced to do this, um, to comply with some regulation, but that's not actually true. So today, it was just like headline skimming, but it was a Bitcoin Magazine article, I think, that said that Wasabi Wallet has not been forced in any way, shape, or form to enact this sort of self censorship. It's self imposed and it's voluntary. And I believe what's happening is that Wasabi Wallet often gets associated and named in the press and in the media whenever there's a hack and funds are coin joined. It's always like a Wasabi thing, and like you see like Chainalysis and governments, you see documents that say, you know, we can unmix wasabi mixes. And so there's just been, it seems like they don't like the fact that they're being constantly associated with illicit activities, whether it's like money laundering or uh, coin joining of hacked funds, and they want to move away from that, right? And so what they're it sounds like they're doing is they're just going to block UTXOs from addresses that are tainted. And you know, there's already there's already something like that in the traditional system where like I think it's like OFAC or something has a list of like, people that you're not allowed to provide financial services to. And Bitcoin companies are supposed to follow these like it includes like what people who are KYC'd on crypto exchanges, and Bitcoin and crypto companies are supposed to follow these, and they do follow these sort of like blacklists and don't let these people. And I think the key point here is that Bitcoin is an amazing protocol tool piece of software. It's almost perfect at achieving its goals, which is like, censorship resistant money that anyone can use in a peer to peer fashion, right?
Yeah.
What corrupts the values of Bitcoin is the things that are being built to service Bitcoin users or on top of Bitcoin, decentralized exchanges, the centralized mixing services, the chain analysis people. Those are all corrupted by a different set of incentives, and they have points of centralization where people or companies can be coerced to do certain things, um, to meet sort of laws and regulations of the existing system. And that's exactly what's happening with Wasabi. Now, you have some companies that when they're not, these guys weren't even forced, but there's like, I can't remember, there's an email provider that I've heard mentioned that they just basically, when the government asked them to give information about their customers, they basically just said, like, no, we're an encrypted email service. And the reason why we exist is to protect customers and people from this kind of snooping from government. So we're just going to shut down the bit. If we are not allowed to operate in this manner, there's no point in us existing, and we're going to shut down. And some people argue that's what Wasabi should have done, but they weren't even coerced into doing this. They're just doing this off their own back because they don't want to be associated with illicit activities. So
Mm. Yeah,
uh,
exactly. So I
it's
appreciate.
difficult, right? I don't know how they feel. I don't know, there's probably, well, not there's probably, there's a group of people who have dedicated substantial amounts of their energy and their life to building this business, right? And they haven't been coerced, but maybe they feel like they are going to cut their business will come into danger of not being able to exist anymore because of potential future regulations, and they're just sort of preempting that and trying to mitigate any danger to the business. But if it was me, and I had the sort of ethos or values that I have around Bitcoin right now, um, I wouldn't run a mixing service if I had to censor transactions. So that's the whole point of a mixing service, is to like not be traceable, like so that no one knows who you are. And you're saying before you even come to the mixing service, I'm going to KYC you and not stop you from using it if you're someone who shouldn't be using mixing services or whatever. So yeah, it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But I'm generally against KYC and anti money laundering KYC stuff, because it happens at it creates so much friction in the system. And you get like, now you have to like declare transactions over $600. You get all these stupid rules and regulations that don't do anything to actually stop money laundering. So I mean, and also the dangers of KYC and AML, like, when your data gets leaked, and if you hold your own keys at home and somebody knows your address, that's really life fucking. Like, if you own a house, you're happy with your family there, and then it gets leaked that, like, you bought a ledger, and now you could be subject to somebody coming and knocking on your door and trying to like hold your family hostage with a gun and shit. Like, that's like real fucked up shit. And so I just don't see how the benefits outweigh of anti money laundering and KYC regulations, how the benefits outweigh the costs. And the reason why governments push these regulations is because they don't bear the cost of enforcing them. They palm off the enforcement to private companies, right?
Yeah,
Like it happens with COVID. Like, airlines have to enforce COVID regulations because otherwise governments fine them for not enforcing them. But it's the government who's imposing them. So how about you spend the money enforcing the rules you put in? Guess what? They wouldn't put in as many rules and regulations in that case, because they'd realize what a pain in the butt it is to actually make them happen. And you would just
oh,
give up and be like, no problem, no point. But when you palm it off and you say, hey, you, little bitch, you go do the dirty work for me, and you spend your own private company's money hiring people, training people, and to enforce these rules, then it's easy, right? You're just like pointing the finger. You go do that. Doesn't cost me
yeah,
anything.
exactly. Oh,
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. So Yeah, it definitely seems like more and more of these, yeah, the governments are just imposing it on companies. But I appreciate the clarification that they weren't necessarily forced; they kind of did it preemptively.
Yep.
And so we kind of are seeing a lot of Bitcoiners, flock to other services, and I think that'll just kind of continue to happen. And then a company like Wasabi that decides to do this is just gonna in the end fail because like if they're promoting coin joining, but only certain people can do it or whatever. Bitcoiners kind of have that same ethos, and they're going to go to a company that is going to keep it all free and open for everybody, and just be a service like that. And then once that service gets shut down, I mean, Bitcoin is a strong community. I wouldn't be surprised if another service just pops up immediately after.
Well, someone's already forked Wasabi Wallet, which is open source code, has already been forked and turned into something called Sake Wallet by anonymous people. Well, they're obviously anonymous, but who knows? Yeah, who knows who they are and whatever. But they're not going to be censoring. Um, but I don't understand enough of like I haven't coin joined yet because I don't understand enough of how it works, like how easy it is to unmix, and if I don't understand it, I might do something actually that like undoes the sort of like the thing that gives you anonymity. You have to like manage your UTXOs and all this shit that I just haven't really gotten into understanding fully yet, and I haven't seen like I haven't just a good resource to learn about it hasn't landed on my lap, and I haven't proactively gone out to search for it and spend time doing it. So I haven't coin joined yet, and I can't like opine too much on whether Wasabi is better than Samurai or whatever. Uh, but yeah.
Yeah, so I've looked into it a little bit because some of the Bitcoin that I own was KYC. So um, some of the good resources that I've seen are BTC sessions. Ben does a great job. He has like a few videos. I think in total they're like maybe 3 hours of videos where he kind of goes and gives a good deep dive explanation on it, and kind of like how to do it and everything like that as well. Um,
Is
so
that your
yeah,
dog?
yeah, he's playing with his toy. He's not happy about the stream keep going on. But I got one more story that's kind of along the same lines of that, a
Mhm.
little bit along the lines of regulation. That the UK they're warning Bitcoin ATM owners that they must be registered with the FCA. And in order to be put to use, and currently the FCA has stated that not a single Bitcoin ATM has been registered, and so they're all considered illegal to use in the UK. And so, yeah, it's just kind of along the same lines of like what we're talking about. I feel like a lot of them, they're going to find ways to. They're either going to register with the FCA, or they're going to comply, or figure out some other way to get around it. But I guess this question's like a two-parter. We kind of had a discussion like this um, on one of our last spaces. I can't remember which one it was, but one, have you ever used a Bitcoin ATM? And two, like, I guess, what do you think about the regulations being put on it?
No, so no, I've never used one, and I actually didn't even like understand. When I first got into Bitcoin, happily KYC'd at like 50 bajillion exchanges, thinking like, oh, I want to try them all. And I was just like, kind of like into, and I realized like that's the most terrible thing to have ever done is to like KYC myself at multiple exchanges because now my data, if it, I have like 10x the chances of data getting leaked. Um, Even if I don't, I'm not holding significant amounts of Bitcoin on any exchange. So, but yeah, the ATM thing, they came to sort of into my realm of, I came to know that they existed when when I joined Bitcoin Twitter and people were talking about how they were good ways of acquiring non KYC Bitcoin in some cases. But it turns out like now a lot of them you have to like, take a selfie or you have to put in a phone number. You can use a burner and whatever. I think they're largely rather irrelevant. I'm sure they exist because like, there's pockets of like places where you can make some money. But it seems like it would be a thing where, you're hoping a passerby sees it and is like, oh, let me see. I'm going to buy 50 pounds of Bitcoin. And like, how many people are actually going to do that? So it feels like a vending machine business kind of thing. Like it's not going to be great. And so, it'll be interesting to see if the whatever regulations that are in play that are being put in place, or that are now being enforced, because they were obviously already in place, they just weren't being enforced and weren't being followed. If following these regulations make the the operation of the existence of Bitcoin ATMs even worth it, it might be like this regulation's like, oh, it's not worth it. If we taking the ATM machines away and then going through like whatever form filling exercise and approval, it's just not worth how much money we make from the ATMs, and maybe they just won't come back in the UK. I don't know. I don't really know. But you'd imagine if you're selling Bitcoin, uh, there's better ways to do it online rather than with a physical machine.
Yeah, for sure. I think we actually had a Dan Wedge, who I do the chips are down with. He said he used a Bitcoin ATM, and essentially they had to enter in a wallet, and they had to make sure that he downloaded a certain app, and so it was all KYC anyway. Um,
Yeah,
which I thought
yeah.
would be kind of like a benefit, right? Like you get a private key, like you put in $50, and then it's like completely non KYC. But I guess, like, after he explained that, it's just kind of not the case, and it doesn't really seem feasible to me either. It's just, there's so many easier ways to purchase and get Bitcoin. So I don't know why. I don't think it's going to be very widespread, and I don't think like this is a big deal for adoption as far as it goes in the UK. But it's just another instance of another country or government trying to put some regulations on it.
Yeah, I mean, if it was non KYC, then you're sure, for those people that are looking to get non KYC sats, which is, let's be honest, a minority of people, then it makes sense that they might exist in a few places. But otherwise, if you're being KYC'd and you have to like download a specific app, it just sounds like more of a hassle than just using a KYC exchange.
Yeah, exactly.
It's happened, Canadian Bitcoiners, don't you know?
Yeah, so the Canadian Bitcoiner said, how long before somebody steals a Bitcoin ATM and thinks it's stuff with Bitcoin? So it's obvious, it's definitely happened. I wouldn't be surprised
Yep.
at all. But yeah, the only experience I've had is like I've seen them in like smoke shops or something.
Mm.
So I mean, just kind of like weird, sketchier places too. So it's never
I,
like more widespread where you're seeing them in like I don't know, grocery store or something like that, where you'd see a normal like ATM or something. But
No,
um,
they seem to be a legacy thing. So I think they were, before, when it was very hard to acquire Bitcoin, like there weren't many exchanges and there's no fiat basically on ramps. Then the physical Bitcoin ATM was a way to get people to buy Bitcoin, or it was a convenient way for people to buy Bitcoin. But now there's obviously a myriad of better ways, whether it's KYC or non KYC. And so the Bitcoin ATM is kind of just like a legacy thing left over from a time before.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, my dog was going off with his chew toy.
No
But
worries.
yeah, I think this is a good place to wrap it unless you got any final thoughts for me.
No, I think we're good. We're seeing a little. This is how starved of a pump we are. That it's like we're up 1.8% for the day at 41.4, 41.5, and that seems like a lot. So,
Yeah, I
um,
think on the day, for at least in the US, it's up like about 2.3%. So I
yeah.
don't know. It seems like we got this barrier here at like 37 to like 43 or so, 44, but that we haven't really been able to break through. And before it was the 58K gang we couldn't break through, and maybe we should have treated them a little better at that time because
I think I tweeted. Have you seen the chart? I think I retweeted it or I tweeted the chart, but it's like it shows the last, maybe from 2020 until now, and you can see the bear market of last summer. The chop we've had now versus the bear market is like infinitely longer. So I think we're peak bearishness. We're at peak bearishness at the moment, in terms of like euphoria. And so to me, what that screams like, I was so stupid in the last big bull run. I was like thinking it's going to go to 100K, and I was like buying shitloads of Bitcoin at 65 and 68 and 63 and 62, right? And those purchases like now hurt because I'm like, damn it, I could have gotten so much more Bitcoin. So I like, the thing I would leave people with is like DCA, but if you're gonna smash buy, do it when you're the most scared and the most bearish, right? Just take that as a signal of like, fuck, I'm really scared right now. I'm really worried. I think Bitcoin might even not make it. That's when you should be buying, right? And when you're super bullish and it's like going to 100K, either DCA but don't smash buy. is what I would say.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think, for me, the more frequently I buy, the less I look at the price action.
Yeah.
So, you just kind of get that priced in. I think not financial advice, of course, but I think DCAing or HCAing or whatever kind of medium you want to use, that there's a benefit to it for sure. And I think just if you believe in Bitcoin, and it's kind of like how early investors get in with stocks or something like that. If you believe in a company, you believe in Bitcoin as the asset, you believe in Bitcoin, the technology, you believe in everything that Bitcoin stands for, then the price of it shouldn't matter as much, because you believe like in the long term that it's going to go up, right? So, and I think as far as Bitcoin goes, the longer your time horizon, the easier it is to just not really worry about too much of these price swings. When you see a big dip or anything like that, you see it more as an opportunity, opposed to um a big negative, and Bitcoin dying, and the world is ending and things like that. So yeah, I agree with your points there, and I think that's a good way to wrap it. So I am Brandon from Green Candle Investments. We're doing this today at noon, and we're actually going to do a Twitter Spaces at 4:30 p.m. Eastern time. So if you want to join us for that rip as well, I don't know if you're going to be able to make it to that, Gandalf, but of course, you're always welcome and invited. But yeah, follow me on Twitter at Green Candle IT. You can see everything else that I got going on, and follow my guest at BTC Gandalf. There's been a lot of fake accounts out there, so make sure you follow the right one. We're usually tweeting at them. So yeah, you got anything else? Any last wrap up words?
Just thank you very much for having me. I think you guys are doing great work. They're pumping out the newsletters, pumping out the content. I know how much work it is, and I really, really respect it. And I appreciate you wanting to hear from me. And just give a shout out to everyone in the audience: Dan, Joey, Canadian Bitcoiners podcast, everyone else that listened. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being so amazing. I love you guys.
Yeah, thank you so much. The chat was amazing. All right, we're going to end this broadcast. Thank you so much. And if you are just catch us on Twitter. All right,
Yeah.
I'm out.
Cheers, dude.